I lost custody of my 6 children many years ago for 8 years over my drug use. After I left rehab, I left rehab in 2019, and I left rehab to getting custody of all of my kids back. Needless to say, it took a lot of effort and a lot of trials and tribulations trying to reintegrate my family. The day that I stepped out of rehab, my kids were not just dealing with coming back into my home, they were also dealing with their dad and I getting a divorce after us being together for 20 years. So there was a lot of trauma. Each kid had their own issue. And for me, it was overwhelming. I was very overwhelmed. I was going through a divorce. I was fresh in my sobriety. I had financial burdens. I had psychological burdens, spiritual burdens. I was not going to therapy at the time. And even though I had gotten a diagnosis for bipolar when I was younger, in that moment I wasn't thinking about that. All I was thinking about was staying sober, not messing the money up, how I was going to get everybody focused. I had different ages of kids in the house. Some were working age, some were school age. I had to get everybody's paperwork together. It was just very overwhelming. And then I was going through a lot of social angst because my ex was dragging me through the mud on social media, flaunting his new relationship, just doing all types of petty stuff. And it was really hard for me. And I did relapse when I got out. I had started drinking. I did a couple little things, but other than that, I pulled it together and then I just stopped completely. And for a lot of people, relapse is a part of their story. It's not part of everybody's story, but honestly, comparing myself to the other people that I went to rehab with, I think I'm doing pretty good because not a lot of us made it out of there alive. I'm not even going to hold you. Out of like 20 people, I would say 2 people stay sober, and one of them was me. So it took a lot. It took a lot of effort for me to be able to get my kids from where they were, which was trauma mode, kind of all over the place. They had no real structure. They had been in a totally different town and they'd been raised a totally different way than the way that I wanted them raised for several years. So there were some behaviors that I had to train them out of, and I had to do it while there was more of them than there was of me. So it took several years for me to be able to learn how to communicate with them without screaming or threatening them. I had to reach out for help. I couldn't do it on my own. Everybody went into therapy. That was off rip. I was in talk therapy. They were in talk therapy, and our talk therapist is also a behavioral therapist. Now, after about 2 years, one of them decided that it wasn't for them, and that was okay. But to this very day, we are all in therapy. That's just what it is. I needed a professional to help them with their mentals. Like, it couldn't just be me. I needed support, and I understood that. And that's also something I learned in rehab. I understood that restoring my family was going to take a community effort. I could not do it on my own. I needed support, I needed advice, I needed a place to vent because you can't vent to your kids. So having a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist or a psychotherapist to be able to talk to and to get advice from and to help you look at things differently really, really helps, especially when you don't have a partner or you don't have a family or you just don't have support. So the first thing I did was get everybody into counseling, and it was non-negotiable, and they don't have to go in person. Even before the pandemic, they just did it over Zoom. And so it was very comfortable for them. And if they didn't want to do it, they don't have to have the camera on. They can do it over the phone. But it's every other week, and it's just non-negotiable. The second thing I did to get them to trust me was that I've always been honest with them. I keep it real. I allow them to help me make decisions that are going to affect them. Even from things that are seemingly small, like allowing them to help me with the grocery list, explaining to them the breakdown of the bills. Something I did very early on was give them access to all of my bank account information and show them how I was utilizing the money, because I was a recovering addict coming into the situation wanting to gain their trust. So I needed them to know that I could manage a home, that I knew what I was doing. I broke down to them where the money was going, what I was using it for. I explained bank accounts and interest rates, and everybody got their own bank account, and I let them be in charge of their own money to an extent, giving them some sort of power and control over their life, because they were coming from an environment where everything was super controlled and they didn't have access to their own funds. So if there were ever funds that came from like their dad for them, I made sure that they didn't have to know exactly how much I got, but I made sure that they got a piece of it. I kept it real with them. I never lied to them. I made sure that I was honest with them, and I for a long time opened up the books. I showed them all the bills. I showed them where my paychecks were going, and I just kept it a stack because I felt like I owed them that. Because if I was them and my mom was an addict and my life were in her hands, I would want to make sure that the light bills were being paid and that, you weren't spending all of our money on crack. I felt like that was fair. I came from a place of feeling like I did need to give them an explanation for my behavior and for my habits, which leads me into the third thing that I did, which was I had to be accountable for my whereabouts. I didn't go out. I sacrificed having any type of relationships. I didn't get boyfriends. I don't hang out. I don't go anywhere. I'm always at home and I'm always with my kids. And I feel like that's a major sacrifice. I see a lot of people invest time in other relationships after they get out of rehab and they finally get their kids back, and they go out on the weekends and they party and they do stuff like that. And that even if they're not like getting drunk or anything, just the fact that they're going out, it's like offensive to their kids, because the kids are like, well, what about us? So I don't really leave them alone very much. I'm always accessible. I structure my life in a way where I could still give them that stay at home mom that they were used to, and still make sure that I'm making money and taking care of everybody. So there are sacrifices that I had to make to show them, hey, you are my priority, because for so long, regardless of the story they were told or what is true, they were abandoned. It like the explanation behind that doesn't matter. The point is they weren't with their parents. They were drugged out of a situation that used to be their stability and their safe place, and that is because of the decisions that me and their father made. So they shouldn't have to suffer for that. Allowing your kids to see the sacrifices that you make for them, and sacrifices things like having free time and having extra relationships, or spending extra money on yourself, showing them through action that you're prioritizing them, spending extra money on them, spending extra time with them, giving more than you probably would had you not messed up to begin with. Because I know before any of this happened, I used to really take spending time with them for granted, and now I don't, because they were gone for so long, and I feel like I owe them my attention. I owe them my patience, and so I give it to them. As far as giving, I set very firm boundaries. That's something that's very important. You can't, because for in the very beginning it always was, well, you weren't there for me, blah 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 blah. Hold on now, we're not going to use that as an excuse for bad behavior. So I had to wipe that out. I had to be very firm. I had to be very firm in disciplining them and holding them accountable. Like, punishments didn't work, and I can't be too aggressive with them, but I also cannot allow them to use me not being there as an excuse for them not wanting to behave or adhere to my rules now. So you have to establish very, very firm boundaries, and don't let them use the past to throw up in your face. And that's why it's important to have talk therapy and open dialogue, so that they can express to you those feelings. And that's another thing. You need to make a safe space for them to talk to you about how they feel about what happened in the past. And you can't get defensive about it or make excuses. You can tell them your side, like what happened, but don't use that as an excuse. And you can't get tired of them expressing it to you. Now, there's a thin line between them using it as a weapon and throwing it up in your face and trying to trigger you with it, and then there's a difference between them finally getting to a point where they get it out of them. It may take more than one conversation and one apology for them to keep bringing it up. They may keep bringing it up because like they went through years of you not being there or whatever they went through, and they need to get that out. Because I'm sorry, your kids are going to end up telling you some really wild stories about things that happened to them or things that they did to other people because you weren't there, and you're probably going to feel guilty about it. But in that moment, it's not about you. So I've learned that I have to make these spaces for them to be honest with me. And you got to just take it. I'm sorry. You got to take it on the chin. And it's going to hurt and it's going to suck. You just going to have to pray that out, work that out. You know what I'm saying? Scrub that out with some bleach on your own time. But I found that I had to make spaces for them to be honest with me about how they felt. And, I don't know how it looks to the outside, but if you know, my kids cuss, I cuss, like, ever since they become teenagers. And they did even ask, they used to ask what cuss words they could say, because I want them to express themselves authentically. I don't let them go around having a pirate mouth, even though their mom and their dad definitely had a pirate mouth. I let them express themselves authentically. And again, there is a line, and they know how to be respectful. But as far as when they are expressing extreme emotions, I have to allow them the space to do that, because they have the right to do that, and they need to get that out of them. And I'd rather them do it with me towards the person that actually put them in the position to have those feelings to begin with, and to go out in the world and be expressing rage at the wrong people and just putting negativity out in the world because they didn't have that space at home to deal with those emotions. Maybe I wasn't raised to process my emotions, but I'm gonna raise mine to process their emotions. Another thing was learning about mental health and good communication, and putting those practices into play with my family and talking to them about it. We have an open door policy, and I make sure to tell them, look, I'm trying to change my behavior too. I'm trying to be a better parent too. If they tell me I'm doing something wrong, I make sure I'm open to it. It's not just I discipline them, I tell them they're being disrespectful and they need to change situation. I made sure that I let them tell me what I was doing wrong as a mom. Like, and for me, it used to be yelling and being real aggressive. Even the way that I held my face and my body, they felt intimidated, and that would make them talk shit, basically. So I had to hold accountability for all the arguments that happened in our family, and I didn't think I was causing them, but because I would come to my kids with the wrong energy when I was trying to discipline them, it caused a lot of arguments, and it took me almost 2 years to realize that. And that's another reason why it's good to have a therapist, because you have a third party on the outside looking in that can help you stay accountable, you know what I'm saying, and we set goals, and it's very good to have a counsel and a backup. But yeah, when it along with the therapy, I also had a case manager when they first came home. The kids had a case manager. They would go out and do activities, and just it was just another person to help get them out of the house and do stuff and pick their brain. But after a while, the kids thought they were the ops, so they wasn't trying to get down with that. So we just stuck with the therapy. That's something we did in the very beginning. And when they first came back, they had a lot of issues with adjusting, and so when you go through stuff mentally, sometimes you don't feel like cleaning your room, or you won't do your hair. So I was just like very gracious and aware of how they felt. Like, for a while, I would keep their room organized until they could do it on their own. I would make sure that their clothes were washed until they could get into a regime of doing it on their own. When you are transitioning kids that you haven't had for a while back into your home, they're not going to automatically pick up on exactly how you want your house cleaned, or the routines or whatever. And it helps them to have routines. We didn't have to do things by a certain time. I pulled them out of school. I homeschooled them. I wanted to completely control the environment. I didn't need them around anything else that was going to cause any more trauma. I just let them stay home and just deal with me and deal with your trauma, and let's deal with this family dynamic before I send y'all out into the world. Because the transition from Baltimore to a small mountain town was enough. Then you're dealing with the divorce. Then you're dealing with two parents just got out of rehab. Then you dealing with the issues that you have, inside of the family with the other siblings. Like, it's too much. It's too much. Then you have societal pressures. It's a lot. Then y'all got the nerve to want to have little girlfriends, little boyfriends. Like, it's a lot. Who is thinking about a routine? You trying to make sure that you have a meal 3 times a day when you living with 7, 8 other people. So they were going through a lot. So I had to be gracious and do a little bit more work. And that's where I come in, keeping the house clean. That's another thing. Kids will comply when they see you putting in work. When they see you working and bringing home money, doing, you know what I mean? Like, they used to see me. I only was the only one that had a job. I was working at FedEx overnight, and it was very grueling. And I would still come home and wash the dishes and make sure food was made and the house was spotless, and they respected that. So that's how I gained their respect. I worked very, very hard, and something about the food, when you make food that tastes good and that is homemade and that just gets them full, that love transmits through that food, and they can feel it. And my children started to comply because I was cooking for them. Nobody wants food out of a box. Nobody wants fast food. You ever notice, if you watch your children real close, if you give them fast food, first of all, they're still hungry. Second of all, they immediately go to the bathroom. Their stomach always upset. And third of all, they angry. They get agitated. That food is not good. You don't want fast food. You want something that is fulfilling. You need to do things and participate in activities that are fulfilling. You need to eat foods that make you feel clean and good, you know. So those are the things that I did to get my kids to trust me after I lost custody of them and regained custody of them. And I had to integrate them back into a family under one roof after being separated for so long. It was mostly action. I prayed over my family all the time. I had to give them grace and time to settle in. I had to have very firm boundaries. I had to set a routine. I made sure that everybody was in therapy, and I had to spend time with them. I had to really get to know who they were. I couldn't just enforce my way of life on them. I had to really embody the things that I wanted them to learn. Instead of just telling them, I would just do it. Sometimes, instead of explaining to someone how you want them to clean a room, you just have them watch you do it, and eventually they will mimic everything that you do. The more I watch them, I realize that with their mouth, they'll try to act like they're not listening, but I can tell that they're listening because they're doing everything I'm doing. They used to make fun of the way that I ate, but now they eat everything I eat. So after all this time, I've realized that I just need to do the right thing, and my words need to match my actions, and I just got to keep showing up. They've seen me not give up, they've seen me persevere, and now I see them exhibit those same qualities. I don't have to yell it into them, beat it into them. I just have to be it myself. And I made sure that I never asked anything of them that I wasn't willing to do myself. And I made sure everybody had a chore, and I made sure that if I gave something to one, everybody got something. You know what I'm saying? I had 6 kids. When they were growing up, when one kid had a birthday, I would make sure that everybody else got a small gift, because you know what would happen if I didn't? They would break his toys. See, I know what I'm doing. And I just wish people would have kept their mouth off my family, because everybody raised their children differently, because everyone is different. You know? So I appreciate you spending time with me here in Fury World. I hope this helped. It is a very long journey to healing your family, even if you weren't separated from them, and even if they don't have mental health issues. Just growing up in the world today, or probably at any time, I mean, it's challenging. It's, you know, but there is light at the end of the rainbow. No. Is that how you say it? I don't know. I don't know. I just know that change is possible, and you can actually heal your family. And yeah, I hope this helped. Thank you for spending time with me here in Fury World. If you would like to check out my music, it's available on all music streaming platforms worldwide under my artist name, The Fury of Abyss. Thank you for spending time with me here in Fury World, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.